here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News.
Welcome to Meet the Presidentiables, Economic Reforms in the New Frontier, Episode 1. Before we officially start, please join us in prayer and the singing of the Philippine National Anthem. Heavenly Father, you are our Creator, our light, our wisdom and strength. May we ask for your guiding hand to lead us through this forum today and every day as we accomplish our work in various tasks. We pray for joy, enthusiasm, and fulfillment in our work. May we conduct ourselves and our business dealings in an environment of fairness, respect, and compassion. May we ask you to enter the hearts and minds of our leaders and countrymen. Give them strength and wisdom so that they may lead us through these difficult times with honesty, integrity, humility, and selfishness. Finally, we pray that you extend your healing hand over us, our families, and our nation, and help us overcome this health crisis that has claimed so many lives, including the lives of many of our friends, family members, and colleagues. Please heal those who are sick and guide the hands and minds of our doctors and nurses as they care for them. All these we humbly pray. Amen. Good evening, everyone. Let us now welcome our host for tonight. He's the chairman and CEO of the Manila Times, Mr. Dante Ang II.
Good evening, Phoenix, FFCCII, members, guests from partner organizations, JRI, IHAP, MAP, MBC, Sheriffville, and Philoen, as well as friends in media. This forum with 2022 election candidates discussing economic reforms issues, underscored by the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, or FINEX, and the Federation of Filipino Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry Incorporated, FFCCCII, is unique in its aim of encouraging the nation to focus on national priorities, particularly on the economic reforms needed by the Philippines to realize its development ambitions. These two organizing groups are apolitical and nonpartisan. Thus, the objectives in organizing this forum are to emphasize the importance of economic reform issues such as job creation, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, support for micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, strengthening our global competitiveness from industries, services to agriculture, boosting foreign direct investments and tourism, increasing trade and exports, modernizing infrastructures, and reducing red tape and inefficiencies, as well as other economic issues. In short, our focus tonight is on economic reforms in a new frontier for a better Philippine future. Before we start, allow me to say that this forum will not be possible without the support of our sponsors, namely Union Bank, Ayala Land Incorporated, Divina Law, First Philippine Holdings Incorporated, Grab Philippines, LT Group Incorporated, United Auctioneers, and the W Group. Special thanks go to our official broadcaster, Signal TV, and to our official media partner, the Manila Times. Besides hosting tonight's event, I'm here to listen and know more about one of the presidential candidates. He will share his economic plans and programs for the country if ever he will be given a chance to serve as the 17th President of the Republic of the Philippines. At this point, I now call on Attorney Francisco Ed Lim, the FINEX President and Senior Legal Counsel of ACRA Law, for his welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Klink. Senator Ping Lacson, my fellow FINEX members, our partners from the Federation of Filipino Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Inc., and other business organizations, the Judicial Reform Initiative, Management Association of the Philippines, Makati Business Club, Investment Houses Association of the Philippines, Philippine Women's Economic Network, Shareholders Association of the Philippines, and our partners, Signal TV, One News, the Manila Times, friends from the media, guests, good evening. In less than 7 months, we will elect the 17th President of our country. We will be doing this amidst the damage that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought not only to our country, but to the world. It is no secret that our country is far lagging behind our neighboring countries in terms of economic recovery from the pandemic. In Phoenix, it is our advocacy to look after our country's business, financial, and economic environment. Hence, our Meet the Presidentiables and Vice Presidentiable series will focus on our candidates' economic platform. For this forum series, we're featuring a single presidential candidate per session to give them more time to present their economic platforms and answer questions from our participants. A separate session with the vice presidential candidates will be held as well. We're very, very thankful for Partido Reforma standard bearer, Senator Ping Lacson, for agreeing to be our first speaker for the series. Next year's election will be very critical. We must be extremely careful in choosing our next set of leaders, especially the president and the vice president of the republic. Our nation's recovery will depend on them. Thank you all, and we hope to see you in our future sessions. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you, Mr. President of Phoenix, Attorney Francis. May I now introduce our moderator for today's session. Attorney Mike Toledo is the head of the government the head for government and public affairs of the Metro Pacific Investments Group, or MPIC. He's also the head of the MVP Group of Media Bureau. Attorney Toledo writes a regular column in the Philippine Star. He is the host of One News Channel's Titans on Signal TV. He was the Chief Operating Officer of Silangan Mindanao Mining Company Incorporated, or SMMCI, a $2 billion copper and gold project in Surigao del Norte, and was also Senior Vice President for Public and Regulatory Affairs of Philex Mining Corporation. He was the President and CEO of the Manila office of the Weber Shandwick, one of the world's largest and leading full-service public relations firm with offices in every major business and governmental capital. Mike has served as press secretary and presidential spokesperson during the administration of former President Joseph Ejercito Estrada. He was also the campaign spokesman and media bureau director of former Defense Secretary Gilbert Chodoro, who ran for president in 2010. Attorney Mike was a corporate, litigation, labor, intellectual property, and criminal lawyer. He started his legal career at the prestigious Angara, Concepcion, Cruz, Regala, and Abello law offices, or ACRA Law. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Law degrees from the University of the Philippines. He earned his Master of Laws in Public International Law at the prestigious London School of Economics and Political Science for a scholarship grant from the British government. He was accepted at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in 1993. He was recently given a 2019 Most Distinguished Alumni Award for College of Arts and Sciences by the University of the Philippines, Manila Alumni Association, and was named Distinguished Veteran for 2019 in Media and Communications by the San Beda University Alumni Association. Attorney Mike, good evening. The screen is yours.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Chairman Klink. It's very kind of you. And of course, I would just like to thank Phoenix and the other supporting organizations and media partners for giving me this opportunity to moderate this very, very important series of talks on economic reforms in the new frontier with our presidentiables. We know very well how important it is for our people, not only the businessmen, not only the tycoons, not only the business leaders, but everyone else, ordinary folks, to really find out what exactly are the economic programs of those seeking the highest office of the land. And we all know that an enlightened and educated citizenry can participate effectively in a democracy. And it is just quite apropos that the first presidential candidate who accepted the invitation of Phoenix is a man who actually does not need any introduction, but protocol dictates that I do introduce him. But we all know that he is not only a man of words, but a man of action. And he's accepting tonight's invitation and being the first to accept it is a clear manifestation of what I just said. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me, with your indulgence, to introduce to you our special guest for tonight. Senator Panfilo Lacson is a member of the Matatag class of 1971 of the Philippine Military Academy, or the PMA. He's a distinguished servant leader in our country. He is best known for his distinctive motto, "What is right must be kept right. What is wrong must be set right." A personal credo he has faithfully observed in his more than 40 years of public service, but he definitely looks much younger than serving 40 years in public service. His rise to national consciousness started when he solved high-profile crimes, including kidnap for ransom cases in the 1980s, the 1990s. And in 1999, he was tasked to head the Philippine National Police, the PNP, which, under his watch, and I was a personal witness to this, enjoyed a revival of the glory days of the PNP, along with the highest public approval ratings in its entire history. In 2001, he earned a Senate seat where he continued to show his no-nonsense brand of leadership. He exhibited his consistent and unflinching resolve, particularly in his call to scrap the Pork Barrel Fund, then known as the Priority Development Assistance Fund, or the PDAF. As early as 2003, a full 10 years before the pork barrel scam involving Janet Lim Napoles exploded in the Filipino people's collective consciousness, he also made sure his 200 million a year PDAF entitlement was returned. Was returned, let me repeat that, to the National Treasury. Very rare indeed. In fact, maybe a lot of people thought that that would be impossible, but he did it. While in the Senate, he also led a sturdy crusade against graft and corruption, as evidenced by the bills he filed and the exposés rather that he made of anonymous transactions that marred our public institutions. During the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th Congresses from 2001 to 2013, he authored or co-authored landmark legislations. This includes the Anti-Money Laundering Law and amendments thereto, the Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2001, the Anti-Red Tape Act of 2007, revised AFP modernization program, responsible parenthood and reproductive health, and sin tax, or the excise tax on alcohol and tobacco. In the aftermath of Super Typhoon Yolanda, which was called Haiyan, that caused widespread and untold destruction, damage, and death in central Philippines, he was appointed Presidential Assistant for Rehabilitation and Recovery with the enviable mandate of unifying the rehabilitation and recovery efforts of government and the private sector. Despite limited authority and government resources, his office crafted an 8-volume, 8,000-page comprehensive rehabilitation and recovery plan with a 167 billion proposed funding in a record 6 months. His efforts in the Yolanda rehabilitation led to the institutionalization of essential mechanisms that assisted calamity-affected communities in building back better, faster, stronger, and safer. In the 2016 elections, the Filipino people again entrusted him with a Senate seat. As a member of the 17th Congress, he continues to safeguard public interests and fight corruption, particularly by shielding the national budget from pork and other types of machinations. so it can truly spur inclusive growth for all Filipinos. He continues to advance his legislative agenda to initiate programs and budget reform and village empowerment, transparency and public accountability, anti-graft and corruption, public order and security. Among the laws that he authored or co-sponsored in the 17th Congress are the Act establishing the Philippine Identification or National ID System, of which is definitely long overdue. I'm glad that it's there now as law and it's being implemented, which provides for easier transactions with the government and private entities and which helps deter criminality. Also, the free irrigation law, the anti-hazing law, and the law restoring the subpoena powers of the Philippine National Police Criminal Investigation and Detection Group, and the Act providing for the rank classification in the Philippine National Police. He also had a key role in crafting the law amending the Anti-Money Laundering Act to include casinos as covered persons, quote unquote, and joint resolutions 1 that authorize increase in the base pay of military and uniformed personnel in government. In the 18th Congress, the laws he authored and or sponsored include the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020, the Bayanihan Tuhilas 1 Act, and the Good Manners and untiring, audacious, making sure dubious congressional insertions and useless appropriations, also known as the pork, are checked and deleted during plenary debates. Because of his continuous crusade against wrongdoing, particularly against the pork barrel system in all its iterations, the pamantasan ng lungsod ng Maynila, where he earned his master's degree in government management, conferred on him last March 27 the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, a distinction that inspires him to remain committed to excellence in public service and total devotion to his duties and responsibilities as Senator of the Republic. Mga kaibigan, ladies and gentlemen, let us all give a warm welcome to the Honorable Senator Panfilo Lacson, presidential candidate under Partido Reforma. That's the thing about going on Zoom. We cannot hear the applause, but I know there are a lot of applause going on. And I can also feel the energy of the crowd. But I guess we just adjust to this new normal. So before we call on our distinguished guests and for the Senator to present this economic program to government, let's take a short commercial break. So don't touch that clicker. Stay with us. Thank you.
Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times.
Welcome back. In case I was not able to greet everybody, good evening. Good evening to everyone. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. At sa atong mga kauban na mga Bisaya, maayong gabi kaninyong tanan. Now we're back, and now it's time to listen to our guest of honor and speaker, Senator Ping Lacson. Senator?
Thank you. Daghang salamat, Attorney Mike Toledo. Yeah, I wish to thank the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, together with the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Incorporated, Signal, and the Manila Times for the opportunity to be the first in line to present my economic platform in your presidential forum. Before I begin our economic prospects in the years to come, I think it is but fair to mention the promising insights of progress that we as a nation worked very hard for in the recent past. Not too long ago, our nation had a message of hope, our fair share of good news stories. In fact, never before in our history had we reached an average annual growth rate of above 6% in over a 10-year period as we did from 2010 to 2019. Economists then predicted that the Philippines will be the 19th largest economy in the world by 2050 and Asia's new economic powerhouse. Yet, somewhere along the way, we missed our opportunities. We lost ground. We failed to insulate our nation from the most severe impact of the worst global health crisis of our time. As we stand, our country is the worst place to be during the pandemic. We ranked at the lowest rung in terms of effectiveness of handling this health crisis. Compared to our ASEAN neighbors, Filipinos are sadly the most disapproving of a government's pandemic response. Suffice to say that the pandemic, worsened by greed and incompetence, has reversed our gains in recent years that I mentioned and magnified the already intrinsic problems that we face as a country. Bad economy, massive corruption of incorrigible proportions, instability of peace and order, joblessness, poverty and hunger, not to mention our humongous national debt and our maritime disputes in the West Philippine Sea. If there's one thing that I have learned from my years of training as a soldier, it is to never go unprepared in any battle. Thus, my economic roadmap, a byproduct of countless consultations with a number of policy and sectoral groups and experts, local officials, and economists, presents concrete, practical, realistic, and sensible reforms that will be our key in transforming our vision into reality that is built on people's trust in their government. Tiwala sa pamunuan na mag-aayos at magdidisiplina sa gobyerno upang ayusin ang pamumuhay ng mga Pilipino. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us a painful lesson. There is no trade-off between our people's health and the health of our economy. Our economic policy hence lies on the foundational ground of our health system, a vital component for national development and security. As I have always been emphasizing, one cannot talk of economic recovery without laying out a comprehensive health agenda to protect the welfare of our country's most important asset, our people. That being said, I commit to offer a future-proof strategy in the new normal, one that can stand firm against the many challenges in the coming years and grab the emerging opportunities we have at hand. We need to move forward and fast. Otherwise, we will drown in this state of misery. Our approach to this health crisis must be proactive, not reactive, based only on science-driven and driven by accurate data and not by pandemic politics, and never motivated by malevolent and unconscionable opportunism to make money out of the people's difficulty and misery. The national government cannot resolve the pandemic all by itself. While it needs to supervise, it should release a certain degree of control. We have to localize the problem because there is no one-size-fits-all approach to the pandemic. As we speak, the regional average of fully vaccinated individuals outside NCR is only 26.6%. This demands the need to bring to the front line the local government units and the private sector who can aggressively turn vaccines into free and robust vaccination campaigns, especially in hard-to-reach and high-risk populations. It is high time that containment strategies such as contact tracing, testing, and treatment be institutionalized and normalized at no cost to the public. We will make this possible by ensuring that the Universal Healthcare Act will not only look good on paper, but one that actually serves its purpose. Healthcare coverage to all Filipinos without any financial burden from out-of-pocket medical expenses. Hence, we will fund the high-cost requirement of the Universal Healthcare Act to cover all barangays, provide subsidies for all indirect contributory populations, ensure optimal benefits for healthcare workers, and achieve the target of 1 hospital bed per 800 population. Sadly, 3 years after its passage and after 3 general appropriations laws, we are stuck in the low-cost states with 173.5 billion peso funding under the 2021 national budget, as medium cost, by the way, starts at 241 billion pesos. This means insufficient funding for all its implementation, severely affecting the human resources for health, capital expenditures, and PhilHealth premiums. This directly explains why health system gaps and level of inequity in health persist, as magnified by the COVID-19 pandemic. Why is this so? Our past and ongoing legislative inquiries show us 3 very similar reasons: corruption, corruption, and more corruption. Our health system is an agenda not solely within the domain of the Department of Health. We have to fix the very tall and centralized health delivery system by fully devolving not only the functions but the resources to the local government units as mandated under the Local Government Code of 1991. It's a harsh reality, but we cannot afford another day of on-off, off-on lockdowns. NEDA made this clear. The present and future costs of COVID-19 and the quarantines are estimated at 41.4 trillion pesos. Imagine, in 2020 alone, we lost 4.3 trillion pesos. Meanwhile, 144 billion pesos per week or 20.5 billion pesos per day was shed from the economy when the National Capital Region Plus was placed under ECQ. In the midst of a recession-induced economic state, the unemployment rate increases, prices of commodities inflate, social services remain lacking. For an ordinary Filipino, this is a feeling too close to his gut. When everyone is tightening their belts, the government has to be the spender of last resort. As economist John Keynes taught us, the government has to infuse money on the economic engine to keep the wheels rolling until such time that the people are ready and confident enough to step in the economic wagon. Spend as government must, but the key here is judicious spending to benefit those who need it, not a well-connected few who rake in large profits through overpricing and ghost or under delivery. As we already know by now, next year, the national debt is projected to reach 13.42 trillion pesos. We need to fund the right priorities and reboot our economy. How? We need to stop the bleeding where we hurt the most. In micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, comprising 99.5% of all enterprises and 63.2% of the labor force, took the first blow because of the lockdowns, hence plunging our economy to an immediate crisis shortly after. To cure this bleeding, we must push for recovery startups through comprehensive and targeted fiscal stimulus packages to aid our businesses in reopening and staying afloat. We need to implement eviction and foreclosure moratoriums and employee retention tax credits to motivate businesses to reopen. Kailangan nating tangkilikin ang sariling atin. We have to resolve poor incentives to local enterprises, as in the poor fate of a local entrepreneur who invested 200 million pesos to retool his equipment to help produce face masks, only to be shortchanged by no less than his own government, courtesy of the DBM procurement service, which procured more expensive face masks through wheeling and dealing and favored Chinese traders, made possible by the highly questionable transfer of 42 billion pesos under the regular budget of the Department of Health. To add insult to injury, these traders cheated by evading payment of taxes in favor of buying pricey luxury cars, if not stashing their profits somewhere outside the Philippines. Where Noah Webster failed in inventing the word to describe an evil act of quenching one's thirst for money out of a pandemic, it took us Filipinos to discover that word. It is called family. We will provide a social safety net, especially for those who are pushed to the brink. In large part, we must bolster and reinvent our conditional cash transfer, aka 4-piece programs, with the overarching principle that every Filipino should bridge the poverty line with a sustainable livelihood and employment opportunities. Our goal is to get people back to work through cash for work mechanisms. For one, we can tap the corporate social responsibility arms of corporations in pursuing initiatives to provide cash payments under decent work conditions to enable them to get back on their feet. We should also capitalize on our able and talented youth sector, which has the potential to drive our economy. We must promote a paid internship program where college graduates and undergraduates can undergo internships in government offices as well as in private corporations and businesses in order to maximize skills development and productivity. My economic roadmap will prioritize the expansion of opportunities for our local farmers and fisherfolk to make sure that no one is left behind. Aside from government support, both at the national and local levels, through technical assistance as well as in the marketing of the local farmers' produce, thus liberating them from the grip and control of middlemen and traders who provide them loans, thus effectively dictating market prices to our food security frontliners. This approach can provide alternatives to lower our reliance on importation of agriculture products. It is high time that we veer away from the import-dependent mentality. The Davao del Norte experience, mostly upon the initiative of the provincial government, provides a good role model in this regard. I cannot imagine for the life of me that in spite of being an archipelagic country, I will live the day to see Filipinos eating imported galunggong. I cannot also understand why only 63% or 2.1 million hectares of our total irrigable 3.128 million hectares of land are irrigated, while Thailand has 17 million hectares of irrigated farmland. Vietnam has 8.3 million hectares, Indonesia 6.7 million hectares. Any agriculturist will tell you that patubig, pataba, at binhi, or irrigation, fertilizer, and seed are the three of the most basic components of an aspiring, self-reliant agricultural country like the Philippines. Thus, a major part of my agenda for the agriculture sector is the completion of our long-time lags in providing effective and sustainable irrigation systems to 100% of our irrigable lands in the country. My economic agenda also puts forward a bold vision of improving our country's tax administration to pump up our revenue collection. I have long been proposing the cross-referencing of data between our major revenue collecting agencies and the other relevant government agencies like the Land Transportation Office, Land Registration Authority, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Department of Trade and Industry to plug our tax collection leakages. Our economic ills are largely hinged on the tradition of political corruption. What we endure is the bankruptcy of our bureaucracy, where government spending is wasteful and unnecessary and departs from our priorities, resists change, and sticks to its old ways. More than ever, we must reinvent our government. It is time we should depart from the more of the same mentality. It is time for the government to really treat the business sector as partners in progress instead of competitors. Over-regulation, when it goes beyond our competition policy, has no place in modern and civilized society, especially at a time when we need to encourage foreign investments and attract more capital inflow in the Philippines. If we truly intend to plug the loopholes in our governance platforms, we need to boost the digitalization of government processes through the outpouring of resources for automation and interoperability of government agencies. I am confident that we can minimize, if not totally eliminate, corruption in government, which can ultimately lead to improved and higher revenue collection and faster, more efficient business transactions. To this end, I will guarantee a historic increase of budget infusion for our research and development efforts, which now stands at a ridiculously pitiful share of just 0.4% of the national budget. As I have consistently stood for in all the years that I have been diligently scrutinizing the expenditure program of the national government, I saw the need to reallocate the national budget to provide adequate resources commensurate with the mandated functions of our local government units. A meaningful devolution, not only on paper, but the actual downloading of functions and fair share of budgetary resources to the local government units, including capacity building interventions to make them competitive, especially those municipalities in the 5th and 6th class categories. This is the essence of my advocacy program called BRAVE, or Budget Reform Advocacy for Village Empowerment. Moreover, it is time to shift from the age-old practice of imposing a budget ceiling for the different national agencies to work on to a zero-based budget planning. We can take off from the best practices of big private corporations in implementing a bottom-up approach in budgeting to address the actual needs of our local government units. This is our budget reform to improve the delivery of basic services, creating employment opportunities, and improving the lives of our people, especially in the disadvantaged, far-flung communities. A bonus outcome of this approach is the congestion of a few highly urbanized metropolitan areas, best exemplified by Metro Manila and Metro Cebu. It is only, or if only the government commits to providing greater equity in resource allocation, trusting the LGUs as the national government partners for development, and exercise prudence in discipline in fiscal management. In due time, the culture of mendicancy and patronage politics will be a thing of the past. We need leadership by example, one that can break away from the politics of entertainment, doublespeak, and lip service, and stand for the rule of law, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability, the very tenets of good governance. In the end, we have to come to terms with the truth that reforms could not happen on their own accord. More than good economic policies and a sound political platform, our country would require change in the moral acuity among those in higher office. It would demand the values of KKK, kakayahan, katapangan, at katapatan in actually turning campaign promises into reality. Again, I thank you all for this opportunity. Mabuhay ang bawat mamamayang Pilipino.
Maraming salamat, Senator Ping Lacson, for your presenting to us in very clear and very certain terms what you call your future-proof strategy in the new normal. I'm sure that the people who listen, our countrymen who listen, have heard for themselves how precise and clear you are in the roadmap that you are proposing if you do become president come next year. My first question to you, Senator Lacson, would be to a large extent because of the pandemic. All our attention, our focus, government, even in the private sector, policymakers have been focused on fighting this pandemic, both on the health aspect and as well as on the economic recovery aspect. But because of that, to a certain extent, we have been a bit blindsided with another looming and very important crisis that are facing us, and that is the energy price and supply problems that abound. You know, China, Europe, India, the United States, and China may be heading with its head first into a power supply shock that will definitely hit China very, very hard. And if the Evergrande meltdown, which caused teutonic shock waves to China's financial system, I believe, and experts believe, that we can expect the same as far as its energy situation is concerned. And if it hits China hard, it will inevitably hit us, and the power curves that will ripple through and impact the global economy and the markets. Now, with this, what will be your plan to address this? Because it is not a question of whether it will happen. I think it will be a question as to when it will happen. Mr. Senator?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Attorney Mike. First, when we passed the train law, there's a provision there. First, ang effectivity ng train law is 2018 to 2020. But there's a provision there, that the Department of Finance is authorized upon the recommendation of the Development Budget Coordinating Committee, or DBCC. Kung ang projection is mataas. Now, Department of Finance is claiming that we will lose in foregone revenues something like 141 billion pesos in VAT and excise taxes. But there's a provision there that authorizes the Department of Finance to suspend to a level not below the amount of taxes collected, or the rate of excise taxes collected at the time of the suspension. So it's not correct to say on the part of the DOF na wala silang magagawa except through legislation. I heard some of the other presidentiables that we need legislation to suspend or to remove the excise taxes on fuel products. No, there's a provision there. If they want to introduce some stopgap measures, they can on their own accord. DBCC and DOF and the executive department can actually suspend. Pero parang sa indexation, it cannot go below the rate at the time of the suspension. Meaning, parang pineg mo na, kung halimbawang nasa 50 pesos per liter, it stops there. So there is no foregone revenues, but there is no incremental increase anymore. So if they really want to help our transport sector, the industries that operate through fuel products, I think they can introduce some stopgap measures. So that is one emergency measure that the DOF and the executive department can introduce. You're right. Yung China is reeling from some internal problems. Yung stock market nila continues to go down. And this will have a telling effect even in the Philippine economy. But pagka pinag-usapan natin yung fuel products, we're almost helpless because the OPEC controls actually the prices based on the law on supply and demand. But we can introduce some stopgap measures in the meantime. And let's see from there what we can still do to alleviate the suffering of our people. Well, we can also introduce some incentives to the transport sector, especially yung ating public utility vehicles. We can include ayuda, in under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, ano, yung Bayanihan 2, we introduce a provision, 5.558 billion pesos para ibigay na ayuda sa mga public utility vehicles. And COA, mind you, nag-plug doon sa implementation because only 1% of the 5.58 billion pesos na nando sa Bayanihan 2 ang na-release. So hirap na hirap yung mga drivers. We see, we witness drivers begging arms, di ba, sa mga kalsada. So yun ang twin measures that we can think of to at least alleviate yung suffering ng mga kababayan natin. Thank you, Attorney Mike.
Very good points that you raised there, Senator Ping. The price of oil has gone up to more than 80, I think, or about 80 per barrel. And they say natural gas, if equivalent, has really gone up, and even the short supply of natural gas in Europe and in other parts of the world. So, with that in mind, and this has been a controversial issue, but other countries are beginning to embrace it. With the supply crunch, and I don't even have to go into the need for more power plants, are you willing, as president, to, for once and for all, allow the operation of a nuclear power plant?
Of a
nuclear power plant?
Nuclear?
Yes.
Provided all the safety measures are in place, then why not? Because other countries are into nuclear power plants, putting up nuclear power plants. Because of the our experience in the Bataan nuclear power plant, medyo negative ang dating. But we should take a second look at this opportunity to reopen, provided all the safety measures are in place. That's my position. The answer is yes.
Thank you. That's a very straight and categorical answer. You mentioned also in your earlier presentation, you spoke about the need for more foreign direct investments. And a number of policymakers, academicians, and even I recall during the time of President Estrada, we even studied this as well. Is there a need to amend the Constitution, especially the economic provisions of the Constitution, so that you can actually encourage foreign direct investments to come in? Or are the laws, as it is now, sufficient?
As we speak, we are deliberating on a bill that pertains to foreign direct investments. Ako, I have my own reservations do sa charter change or amendment of the charter. Why? Because it's like a gripo. Once you open it, hindi mo na alam kung ilang amount ng tubig ang lalabas dyan. Well, it's easy to say that we will only touch on the economic provisions. Pero pag nandyan na, other provisions, particularly political provisions that would include extension of terms of office of so many legislators and even other elected officials. Palagay ko yung mga kababayan natin ayaw nito. So, yun ang aking major reservation pagdating sa amendment ng charter. But we can remedy the situation through legislation. In fact, we are now in the midst of debating on the provisions of the Foreign Direct Investments Act, the amendments thereto.
Now, since we're really focusing, of course, on the economy as well, if elected president, who will be the key members of your economic team? And why did you particularly choose this particular person?
I have some people in mind, but I'm not at liberty to mention their names. Baka mamaya hindi accept. So, this, mas magandang offer kaysa sa ina-applyan. That's my basic attitude towards appointing members of the cabinet. Pag nag-apply, siguro double vetting ang gagawin or triple vetting. Pag in-offer, ibig sabihin, pinag-aralan ng mabuti. Mas mainam na. That's my attitude, by the way.
Now, Now, also in relation to that, and again, perhaps also a controversial issue, it is quite sad that the Philippines is one of the highly mineralized countries in this world. We're top three, top five when it comes to gold, copper, nickel, and all this God given wealth, which, if properly harnessed, can actually help fight poverty. Because if they're just underneath the ground, they're not worth anything. And yet, it seems that our policy towards mining is not here or there. Uh, and yet, the Mining Act, as it is right now, actually allows several types and forms of mining supportive of the provisions of the Constitution on the exploitation and use of our natural resources. So, what will it be, uh, Mr. Senator? Would be your position when it comes to mining?
Well, we should encourage, as you said, no, they're just lying underneath the ground. Ang problema, yung small-scale mining is so abused, nandyan yung problema. Yung responsible mining should come to mind, and the big mining companies, they're responsible enough. Ang problema yung small-scale mining na dapat, di ba, pick and shovel lang yung gagamitin. Pero hindi, big machineries na yung ginagamit and hindi pa masyado nagbabayad ng taxes. So there goes the problem. Again, it involves corruption. Whenever you transact business with government, para bang kasama na, parang given na yung corruption. That's why I'm very strong against committing corruption in government. Ito yung primary talaga because to my mind, if we solve corruption, we stop corruption, at least 50% of our country's problems will be gone. Solve na kagad. Because ito talaga what's killing us in every aspect of our existence, of our activities as Filipinos. Nasa kalsada, nasa opisina, makipag-transact, pag-procure, lahat may kasamang corruption. You can just imagine the amount of budget being wasted, yung leaks and loss to corruption. Kung judicious lang yung pag-spend ng ating resources, ang dami natin magagawa, ang daming kayang gawin. But the problem is, from mining to other forms of human endeavors, yung mga enterprises, lahat merong corruption. So yan talaga yung dapat gawing focus. And we cannot, as a leader of the country, hindi po pwedeng you cannot practice what you preach, di ba? Ang tawag ko nga kanina, I mentioned in my remarks, in my speech, yung leadership by example. To me, that's second to none. There is no substitute to it. Kasi pag ang leader nagbabiolate, how can he impose on his subalterns not to violate laws, not to commit corruption, if the leader or leaders themselves are committing corruption?
You also mentioned in your presentation, Mr. Senator, on maritime disputes in the West Philippine Sea. Would you agree for both countries, for example, in this case, China, to enter into a joint venture agreement to develop the area, especially Reed Bank in the West Philippine Sea, which, according to initial studies, is very rich when it comes to gas and oil, even bigger than Malampaya. But the problem is because of the ongoing dispute, which perhaps it's no longer a dispute because we categorically won in the arbitral decision a few years ago. But because of this issue, it was difficult for us to send ships, seismic ships, to study the area and to drill and to check. Because at the end of the day, if there's nothing there, what's there to quibble about? So would you be agreeable to proceed and allowing a potential joint venture arrangement between China perhaps, or any other country for that matter, to develop this potentially rich source of gas? Like Qatar is so rich because of its own gas. That's only their natural resource. And again, this is another natural resource underneath the ground and still remain untapped because of this ongoing geopolitical problem?
First, you're correct, ano? Very rich talaga sa natural gas at saka oil yung area in the West Philippine Sea. I will quote Senator Enrile, who is I think the most well-read senator of the Republic. Ano? Ang sabi niya sa akin noon, when I visited him in Camp Crame, sabi niya, alam mo Ping, ang makikita mong deposit ng oil do sa area na yon, hundreds of billions of barrels. Pagkukwentahin mo yung natural gas, it could run to trillions of barrels. Yan ang kanyang, based on his reading. And as early as 1968, I read this somewhere. As early as 1968, China had already deployed geologists. And that's why they're so interested in that area. But, yung joint exploration, as long as they would adhere to the constitutional provision of 60-40, I'm all for it. Why? And I hope no PLA is listening. Pag 60-40, it only shows that we own the area, those islands. We have sovereign rights over these areas. If they will adhere to the 60-40 provision of the Constitution when it comes to joint ventures, then I'm all for it. If not, maybe we should go back and review our security situation. And now, I mentioned the security in the West Philippine Sea. I have always emphasized this. We are a very weak country militarily compared to China. And the only way we can secure the area is through a balance of power. When I say balance of power, we rely on the other countries as militarily strong as China. We have our mutual defense treaty with the United States, and I think that is a potent weapon in our arsenal, yet untapped. We have bilateral agreement with Australia, with Japan, with other countries. The European Union has expressed their willingness to patrol the area because they had their own interests. Because after all, foreign policy is always anchored on national interest. And we cannot rely on these countries if they have no national interest or any interest at all in those areas. But they have, because 10 to 12% of the maritime trade dumadaan dyan sa area na yan. So we should seize the opportunity that other countries are also interested in securing the area. So my position is yes, I'm for joint exploration, provided the agreement will respect the constitutional provision of 60-40.
Thank you very much, Senator. We'll take a short break for a few commercials, and we'll be right back. So don't go away. Stay with us.
And One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News. Phoenix, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of forum on economic reforms. First off is presidential aspirant Panfilo Lacson in Meet the Presidentiables. Premieres October 30, Saturday at 7:30 p.m. here on One News.
Welcome back to the Meet the Presidentiables, economic reforms in the new frontier, sponsored by Phoenix and the other business organizations, as well as our media partners, Signal and the Manila Times, and of course the FFCCI. Again, welcome back, Senator Lacson. I guess the elephant in the room, I mean, climate change. Meeting Glasgow on COP21, and there's been a lot of talk about climate change and the importance of this being addressed. But at the same time, as the energy crisis in Europe, for example, has shown, as an example, that an energy policy that will phase out fossil fuels overnight and rely solely, for example, on renewable energy sources alone is unrealistic and even dangerous. What is your position on climate change and on a push towards renewable? How fast do you intend to do that? Or will you be following a certain time frame and timetable to be able to meet the demands of a growing economy, especially an economy that is reeling from the devastation that wrought havoc to our own economy?
Well, we already passed the Renewable Energy Act, way back. I think 2 Congresses ago. And I remember it was Mick Zubiri who sponsored that measure. So there's already a law that we should follow. But this is a complicated problem because, as you said, mayroong mga dangers, may mga risks, involved, and we should follow the lead. We don't have the technical expertise to analyze all this. And we should learn from the mistakes of other countries. If in Europe, yun yung experience nila nakikita, we should really take a second look before we pursue the program. But yes, yung climate change is one thing that we should really address. We already experienced yung Yolanda, the Typhoon Haiyan, that wreaked havoc sa central Philippines. I myself saw the devastation and the suffering of our people there, 171 cities and municipalities. And this is all about climate change, yung kapabayaan na nangyari sa pag-address sa environment. But, we, as I said, wala tayong masyadong expertise, but we have so many advocates. Senator Loren Legarda is one really high-profile advocate pagdating sa climate change. So, my answer is we should learn from the lessons of the other countries who have the wherewithal to really go deep into analyzing the effects of climate change and the introduction of the renewable or alternative energy.
Thank you. With the limited fiscal headroom that we have right now, what priority will you give build infrastructure projects? And in relation to that, what role will PPP play in your strategy?
The public-private partnership should be encouraged, because after all, we're deep in debt, and we need to really build more infrastructure projects. We should embark on more ambitious infrastructure programs. But as I analyze the DPWH budget and even the DOTR, ang daming nasasayang na pera dyan. Tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of pesos, nakapark sa preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance meaning, buo pa yung kalsada, konkreto pa, ginajackhammer na. Why? It is so contractor friendly that putting in tens of billions of pesos instead of building new roads. I encountered this as a concern from businessmen in Pampanga when we made our rounds. Si Senate President Tito and myself, we had this good discussion with some businessmen in Pampanga province. Ito yung na-observe nila. Bakit lagi na lang preventive maintenance yung pinopondohan? Well, doon tayo babalik sa budget reform that I was talking about. Because there's less intervention or participation of the local government units. It's all driven dito sa central government. Lahat na lang, instead of devolving the funds, ang nade-devolve lang yung functions. And who would know better the needs and priorities of local government units than the local government officials themselves? Ang nangyayari, district representatives do not participate anymore in the crafting of the local development plans because after all, sabi nila, pagdating sa Congress, kami yung hari, kami yung may power of the purse. So what suffers? Yung planning ng mga projects. Sometimes, this is a harsh reality. I hate to mention this, but this is really a fact. Yung mga projects being introduced by some lawmakers came from contractors themselves. Hindi to output noong local development plans, meaning hindi ito yung pinaghirapan ng local development councils. And ito yung bottom-up budgeting system that I was referring to as I mentioned it in my speech. Because we really should activate the local development councils and allow local government units to participate in nation building. Ano nangyayari? Yung culture of mendicancy, whenever tulad ngayon, budget season, maski may pandemic, we would encounter local government officials carrying folders in the corridors of the Senate. Nagmamakaawa, mabigyan ng project. When in fact, it could have been carried already in the National Expenditure Program had the local development councils been active in participating in the crafting of the national budget. So, ang sabi ko, instead of a budget ceiling being imposed by the DBCC para sa lahat ng national agencies, it should be zero-based. Meaning, each and every agency should start from zero and justify, explain why such amount should be given to them to finance their own PAPs, projects, activities, and programs. Baliktad lagi nangyayari, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Allow me to read. I receive a couple of questions from our audience at this point. So if I may allow me to read some of these questions. There's a question here on the education system. How do you find the present education system in the country? Do you think that there is a need to make further improvements for our people, especially the youth, to be able to compete in the global arena, so to speak? What is the level of our educational capabilities from the primary or elementary all the way up to college?
Definitely, it needs improvement. For one, I think it is the United Nations that made this study. Yung growth mindset ng mga kabataan natin, 31%. Meaning, 69% pagdating ng 15 years old or years of age, ayaw na mag-grow, ayaw na mag-aral. Sabi nila, dito lang ako sa bukid. We should change that mindset. that's really dangerous. Growth mindset stops at 15 years of age. At 69% of our young people don't want to grow anymore when they reach the age of 15. So that's one. Again, yung school building program natin leaves much to be desired, because while we have budgeted year in and year out, given them the necessary budget for their school building programs, hindi na itatayo. There's so much unused appropriations under the expenditure program of the Department of Education. Maraming problema talaga, maraming reforms na dapat gawin sa ating education sector. Yung mga SUCs, this is just top of mind, Mike. Lagi na lang mga liberal arts yung focus ng ating mga kabataan. So why don't we just introduce a new concept wherein SUCs, especially those in the agricultural areas of the country, mag-focus na lang doon sa mga courses pertaining to agriculture and other technical courses instead of, making students enroll, because ang naging mindset na ng mga kabataan natin, ikaw, naging abogado ka, siguro kung pinag-aral ka ni Boy na maging agriculturist, baka tumanggi ka kasi iba yung mindset mo rin, di ba? Gusto natin laging parang white-collar job pupuntahan. So change the mindset of our youth, di ba?
Tama ka doon, Senator. In fact, may nakakausap kami mga batang anak ng mga minero sa mga mining companies.
Yeah.
At magugulat ka na they do not want to follow the footsteps of their father and become miners. And that's what we need, for example. Or even farmers. Maraming, kagaya na sinabi nyo, marami sa ating mga kabataan, they would rather work perhaps in mga BPOs.
Yeah.
Parang, I guess, the lure of perhaps the salaries essentially, maybe initially bigger, and siguro mas may konting dating siguro as far as they're concerned. There seems to be, there's a need to readjust the mindset, and retool the mindset of people. And agriculture, definitely a sector that can definitely help the country and the economy really rebound. It's even the number one employer. But sadly, we all know that may issue tayo doon.
Unfortunately, it is only in the Philippines na yung farmer mahirap. You go to the United States, you go to Europe, the farmers are the richest in their communities, di ba?
That is true. That is true. That is true. In relation to also what you said, Senator, on education, di ba isa din sa isang problema na hinaharap natin is what you call stunting. Related yun apparently, studies have shown, empirical data gathered both locally and internationally have shown that sadly our young is suffering from what you call stunting because of the lack of basic vitamins, nutrition needed, especially during the crucial stages of one's development. And that would result, sadly, maybe to a nation of idiots if this is not addressed. So, do you have any program to address this issue of stunting? Your microphone, I think, Senator, your microphone.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
You're correct. Yung stunting ng mga bata. No, we have, when we deliberated on the budget of DSWD, we found out that aside from 4 Ps, we in the budget of the DSWD, I suppose, merong supplementary feeding program, billions of pesos. I don't have the exact figure, and I asked them, bakit yung mga bata natin, in spite of that program, supplementary feeding program, ang UNICEF made a study, yung Filipino infants or yung mga bata natin, 1/3 sa kanila stunted. Yung stunting rate natin 33%. Very very poor ang ating accomplishment along this line. but I did not get a clear answer from the director in charge of that program. No, and taon-taon we are funding so many programs, 16 of them, no, on top of the 4Ps. But ang tawag nga natin pantawid pampamilya.
Pamilya.
Di ba dapat pang-ahon? Kasi kung pantawid lang, tatawid lang, walang asenso. So, doon din sa aking speech, di ba binanggit ko, dapat siguro gawin nating sa halip ng pantawid, pang-ahon, we can add more, but dapat may papupuntahan, maging productive. Hindi yung pang-araw-araw lang pangtawid. So, dapat may purpose. Instead of just giving them ayuda, dapat mayroong purpose na someday, they will graduate and they will reap the the fruits of the ayuda na one of the programs sa feeding supplementary feeding program. I think there's something wrong somewhere. Bakit hindi umaalis do sa rate ng yung stunting rate ng ating mga bata?
May katanungan na naman tayo sa ating mga tagapakinig at nanonood kasi nasa TV din po tayo, no? TV, radyo, Facebook, lahat na. Pinapanood tayo ngayon. Ang katanungan na ito ay, are the LGUs ready to take on responsibilities for the health concerns of their constituents? How do you propose to adequately fund the universal healthcare system? He also mentions here PhilHealth being unable to settle its mounting account payables to the country's hospitals. So what would be the steps that you will be taking to address this problem from one of our listeners, Mr. Senator?
Yes. Let us trust the LGUs. They care for their constituents as much as we do in the national government. And sila yung directly in contact with their constituents. And alam nila, mananagot sila if they mismanage the healthcare programs of the government. So my position here is devolve, not only the functions, but also the resources. Because district hospitals, for example, we visited some provinces. Ang daing ng mga governors, yung district hospitals, walang lamang facilities. Because national government fails to sustain or maintain the facilities or even give them the facilities needed in those hospitals. Look at itong isang na-discover ko, di ba, yung overpriced ambulance. Yung LGU nag-purchase 1.5 million per ambulance na fully equipped. Ang DOH, dahil sila yung nag-procure for the LGUs, 2.5 million. So right away, merong overpricing na 1 million. So ito yung naging problema. While ang dapat i-discourage natin yung very tall and centralized management of funds, when the LGUs are equally capable in taking care of their constituents pagdating sa healthcare programs nila. So I'm all for devolution, not only of functions but also of resources.
Now that you touch on devolution, perhaps just very quickly as a reaction and a question as well. Kasi nga, maganda nga yung vision and purpose ng local government code. And nasa saligang batas yun at it was implemented into law years ago, devolving powers to the local government units and empowering them. But ang nangyayari, sa naririnig natin, nababalitaan natin at sa experience natin is, while a lot of these functions were devolved, the expertise was not devolved. And even perhaps some of the equipment or even the funding were not exactly devolved. So yes, there has been devolution, and they started years and years ago, and yet there's still a lack of basic, for example, primary healthcare services in several places throughout the archipelago. Paano ba yun, Mr. Senator? Kailangan bang i-amenda pa yung local government code or ano bang dapat natin gawin?
No need, Capacity building should be part of the devolution. The President issued EO 138. This is in compliance with the Mandanas ruling by the Supreme Court. No? EO 138. But when we look at the budget, okay, parang compliance on paper. Yeah, ganun ang nangyayari. For example, again, DPWH, nag-reduce yung local projects, local programs under the DPWH budget by 89%. So we were expecting na mabawasan yung budget ng DPWH. But lo and behold, 5.8% lang yung nabawas sa budget ng DPWH. We found out that there's another program. Ang tawag nila convergence, yung jurisdictional convergence. Ibig sabihin, nagko-crossover from one province to another to justify that they should hold on to the funds. Alam mo may increase down 232%. So again, devolution on paper, compliance with the with EO 138 on devolution kasi ang EO 138 is may phasing ang full implementation is 2024 but the first phase should be in 2022 next year. So again, I'll share with you my experience in Yolanda, yung USAID kasi yung mission director at that time, Miss Gloria Steele, Director Gloria Filipina.
Yeah.
Alam mo ba, because they offered us $10 million in technical support and assistance. One of the legacy projects na iniwanan namin do sa 171 cities and municipalities, they provided the matriculation fee, the tuition fee, and we were able to send to the Development Academy of the Philippines something like 161 community planners, yung mga local government staff. And 161 of them graduated. They have now master's degree on planning, development, and so forth and so on. Pinag-aral sa DAP to the tune of 150,000 pesos per student. So capacity building. But we told them that they should stay in their municipalities for a certain number of years, parang contract. Because pinag-aral namin sila, kailan magsilbi sila doon. Kasi baka mag-alay saan pumunta ng Middle East. So nilagyan namin ng safety net. So this is part of the devolution program. This should be part, capacity building. We should encourage our local government units, especially the 5th and 6th class municipalities, mostly era-dependent. Kailangan talaga makapacitate sila so they can be progressive on their own. Hindi yung asa na lang. Sabi ko nga, yung culture of mendicancy ang nangyayari, hindi talaga asenso. I talked to one mayor in, I think, Tabo in Leyte. Ang local revenue, 1 million. Ang IRA niya, 23 million. But we know, Mike, you and I know that 20% lang ang nagagamit for development sa IRA. The rest, atado na yun earmarked na. SK, Calamity, and so forth and so on. So, dapat ma-infuse talaga yung pondo sa mga local. And that's the essence of my advocacy, yung tinatawag kong BRAVE. Because we will empower the villages, the barangays, and they should be part of the budget planning process. They should also be part of the implementation of projects. Hindi yung lahat dinidikta ng central government. Sabi ko nga, di ba, one bonus na makukuha sa approach is yung decongestion. Because we converge in Metro Manila, in Metro Cebu, only because there are no opportunities in their areas, in their localities. But when we download resources to the localities and enable them to develop on their own livelihood, development or infrastructure projects and programs, probably those in Metro Manila will just go home because there are job opportunities in their areas. So yun lagi yung aking thrust or direction, devolution and empowerment of the local government units.
Thank you, Senator. May marami pa tayong katanungan galing sa mga nakikinig sa atin. Do you favor relaxing the deposit secrecy law? It is said that it is the most stringent as compared to other global standards and may keep us in the FATF watch list and invite financial sanctions.
Mike, I'll tell you one thing, as far as I can remember, every Congress, pinapile ko yung exemptions ng lahat ng government officials, government employees from clerk all the way up to the president. from the provisions of the bank secrecy law. Unfortunately, hindi lumalabas ng committee. No? But, records can bear me out. I have always filed that. I checked with my staff, my legislative staff. Sabi ko, lagi natin pinapile yan. Every Congress, pinapile namin yon, pero hindi nakakapasa. So I think, and we should, as government officials and employees, we should not hide under the provisions of the Bank Secrecy Act.
So parang, so in a way, Senator, it's akin to what's happening to the anti-dynasty bill. It is provided for in the Constitution, pero hanggang ngayon wala pang implementing law, so to speak. No? Ganun na, parang ganun ang nangyayari. And in relation to that, what is your stand on the anti-dynasty bill?
It is in the Constitution. What we need is an enabling law, because without any enabling law, because we cannot define anong extent ng dynasty. Is it father and son, uncle and niece or nephew? Kailangan ma-define. But my position is, since it is in the Constitution, we should comply with the provision, any provision for that matter, in the Constitution. I also filed a bill, yung succession. Because yung succession stops at the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, God forbid, what if kung sa SONA, mawalop yung lahat ng top 4 officials, the President, the Vice President, who are in the podium, di ba?
Yeah.
Of course, the Vice President is somewhere in the gallery. But what if may nangyari, wala tayong succession, there will be constitutional crisis. That's why I filed the bill, because it's in the Constitution that we need an enabling law to regarding constitutional succession.
Correct.
So marami tayong nasa Constitution na ewan ko, ayaw pag sinabing enabling law, parang hirap na hirap magpasa ng batas. I don't know why.
Yeah, maganda yun, yung sa succession. I recall yung palabas sa Netflix, no? Yung Designated Survivor.
That is correct. That is correct.
We have another question from our listeners. I guess they're taking advantage really of your presence, Senator Ping. What will be the shape and thrust of foreign policy under a Lacson administration, given our present realities and political situation?
Well, basic is foreign policy is always anchored on national interest. Second, dapat independent foreign policy. No? Not pro-China, not pro-US, but pro-Philippines. That is the basic requirement of a foreign policy. Ang overtime, di ba parang napabayaan din. Alam mo yung mga ambassadors natin, and I'd like to take this opportunity. I also filed the bill. No? I found out na yung mga retired ambassadors are receiving, sila yung naiwanan doon sa pension system ng Pilipinas. Some of them, nalaman ko, ambassador nag-retire pagkatapos parang nasa mga 37, 40,000 lang yung kanilang pension, way below their salary grade and their status as ambassadors. So we should really enrich, kasi these are, I've encountered, I'm the chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs in the Commission on Appointments. And I am in constant touch with most of our diplomats, sa diplomatic community, meaning yung ating mga Philippine ambassadors and consuls. And among the different agencies in government, I find the members of yung officials of the Department of Foreign Affairs, sila yung pinaka-professional. Talagang because they represent our country abroad, and rightly so, they parang sila yung pinaka-statesman sa tingin ko, Mike. So
well, maraming salamat. I'm afraid we ran out of time, no, and we still have actually a lot of questions from our listeners, but I'm sure our listeners would, if you can just send your questions, and we will send it to the good senator, and I'm sure he'll be willing to answer the questions that you'll be sending. But thank you so much for sending all these very, very intelligent and relevant questions. Senator Ping, since kayo po ang unang tumanggap ng imbitasyon na magsalita dito sa ating Meet the Presidentiables, no, on the economic programs of each presidential candidate, I think we owe it to you at least allow you to give one final word before we close this part of the open forum.
Yes, I have no final word except to thank all of you, no? Phoenix, si Attorney Francis, and then the Federation, si Henry, and of course si Dante Ang II. No? I'd like to thank you all, especially you. You are, I think you were kind enough, no, in propounding the questions. Siguro tinira mo yung mga more controversial questions. So I thank you for that. So again, sabi ko at the start of the program or even before we started, I'm willing to be your guinea pig. So there are some adjustments or improvement, and then go ahead. No? I won't mind. So.
Well, you actually did great, Senator Ping. You answered the questions honestly and forthright and with candor and definitely full of substance. So maraming salamat din po. And it was good to see you again, Senator Ping. And
Yes.
I'm sure I'll be seeing you again soon.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I would like to, again, thank you, Senator Ping. And thank you very much sa ating pong tagapakinig. And I would like to turn back the floor to our host, Chairman Clink Ang. Clink?
Thank you, Senator Lacson, for sharing your plans and programs. I feel that we could probably go on for a few more hours, but all good things must come to an end. Thank you also to Attorney Mike for ably moderating tonight's discussion. Truly, the discourse this evening is relevant to all of us, the voters. The exchange here will hopefully will help many of us make a wise decision in May 2022. So to close today's session, I now call on Dr. Henry Limbon Leong, President of the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Incorporated. Dr. Henry?
Thank you, Click. Honorable Senator Ping Lacson, a close friend of the Federation since his time as PNP Chief. Phoenix President Francis Lim, Manila Times Chairman and CEO Dante Kling Ang II, Attorney Mike Toledo, PIC Director for Government Relations and Public Affairs. My fellow officers of the Federation, our sponsors and friends in media, esteemed guests and viewers, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. On behalf of the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry Incorporated, FFCCCII, and our co-presenters, Phoenix, Signal, and the Manila Times, I would like to thank our guest presidential candidate, Senator Panfilo Lacson of Partido Reforma, for gracing our Meet the Presidentiables Forum this evening. In the previous elections, our federations held election candidates forums for officers and members during our council meetings, but at this time, due to the pandemic, we can only hold virtual forums. We are pleased to have this event together with Phoenix to know more about our candidates. And we also want to thank Senator Ping Lacson's campaign team for reaching out to us. We greatly appreciate this opportunity to listen to Senator Lacson's platform and plans for our country. His economic policies stand on important issues, and his message to the business and finance community and to all of the voters. We have worked with Senator Ping Lacson for our peace and order advocacy since he was with the PNP and now at the PNP Foundation. And he's very hardworking, determined, and dedicated to his work. Good luck in the coming election, Mr. Senator. We hope for your continued support in helping the business community and our local enterprises affected by COVID-19 in order to save jobs and boost our recovery. One of these is through the vaccination, and our Federation has initiated our own COVID-19 vaccination program, Operation Bakuna, in support of the government's national vaccination program to inoculate 250,000 economic frontliners, the entrepreneurs, the employees nationwide. Our Federation also came up proposals to give strong stimulus for economic recovery, including low interest rates, suspending collections of interest and principal payments on loans by struggling businesses at least by a few months, increasing lending support for businesses. Since 1954, our federation and our 170 chapters composed of Filipino-Chinese business across the countries have been actively involved in promoting business and industry development, investment growth, providing jobs to our countrymen and as a contribution to economic growth, and helping uplift the lives of fellow Filipinos through our socio-economic programs such as various food programs, our medical missions, calamity and COVID-19 relief operations, and many, many others. By pursuing all of this, we hope to contribute to our common goal of achieving dynamic growth and progress for our country and people. The coming election will be very important as we will choose our next leaders who will guide our country through the pandemic that has disrupted lives and livelihoods. The policies and initiatives of our next leader will be crucial in our journey towards recovery from the pandemic. Every vote matters, so we want to remind and encourage everybody to cast your votes on May 9 as we choose the next leaders of our country. Once again, our heartfelt gratitude to Senator Ping Lacson. More power and good luck, Mr. Senators. Finally, we'd also like to thank all of our sponsors and partners, organizations, attendees, and viewers. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat and keep safe and stay healthy. Thank you at mabuhay ang Pilipinas.
Thank you, President Henry. Thank you, Senator Lacson. And of course, to all those watching this evening, thank you and see you at our next sessions. Good evening.
Minutes, FFCCCII, the Manila Times, and One News bring you a series of Forum on Economic Reform